The back room of Harlan's saloon reeked of cheap liquor, sweat, and despair. Anna's wrists were bound with coarse rope, raw and bleeding where the fibers cut into her skin. Beside her, Clara, her younger sister, looked small, pale, trembling so hard she could barely breathe. Harlan stood blocking their way, a cruel grin twisting across his rough face. In the corner, Doyle spun a knife in his hand, his eyes gleaming with sick delight. 2 men, 2 shadows, and no way out. No more paying with money, Harlan growled. This time, you pay with flesh. Anna's heart pounded so hard, it felt like it would tear through her chest. Her lips were split from the earlier slap, her mouth dry as sand. She looked into Clara's wide, tear-filled eyes, pleading desperate. Her sister was barely 20, far too young to be dragged into this hell. Harlan yanked Anna upright, his rancid breath hot against her face. You or her, choose. His fingers traced the rope marks, cutting into Clara's skin. Clara whimpered, a broken sound that ripped through Anna's heart. Anna closed her eyes, chest tight, with agony. With what little strength she had left, she forced the words out. I'll do it. Please, just let my sister go. In that instant, Anna was not yet stripped bare, but inside, everything had already shattered. She had traded her pride, her body for Clara's life. Clara's sobs tore through the thin wooden walls. No, don't, someone, please help us. In the main room, Ethan Cole heard. He had only meant to stop for a drink to keep to himself. A man in his 50s, hair streaked with gray shoulders, worn down by years on the high plains. But that cry wasn't just a sound. It was a knife reopening an old wound, a memory of his own daughter's scream that night before she was stolen from him forever. Ethan set down his glass and rose. His boots thudded heavy against the floorboards. When he shoved the door open, the scene froze before his eyes. Anna's torn blouse, her desperate stare, Clara bound and weeping, Harlan pressing close, Doyle grinning with a blade glinting in the lamplight. The nightmare surged back. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand brushed the revolver at his hip. Harlan snarled, Not your business, old man. Walk away. Ethan didn't move. His gaze locked on Anna, her silent plea as clear as words. The room stretched taut as a drawn bowstring. Clara sobbed, choking out, Please don't let them. That sound ignited the storm inside Ethan. In a blink, his gun was drawn, the click of the hammer, sharp as thunder. Doyle froze, knife suspended. Harlan's grin vanished. Let them go. Ethan's voice was low, cold, steel-edged. Harlan hesitated. The town still whispered about Ethan Cole, the former gunslinger who never missed. After a curse, he slashed the ropes free. Doyle backed off the knife, clattering to the floor. Anna stumbled into Clara's arms, clutching her sister, as both shook with sobs. A fragile thread of hope flickered back to life. Ethan kept the gun steady, his eyes like ice. Get out! Both of you! Harlan spat in rage, humiliated, and dragged Doyle toward the door. Before leaving, he snarled, This isn't over, old man. You'll pay for this. The door slammed shut, silence returning. Anna turned, her voice trembling. Why did you help us? You don't even know us. Ethan slid the revolver back into its holster, his gaze heavy with memories, too painful to speak aloud. His reply was barely above a whisper. Because someone should have saved my daughter. But no one did. Clara broke into fresh sobs, clutching at her sister. Anna held her tight, silent, her throat too knotted for words. Are we safe now? Ethan's eyes hardened again. He looked toward the door. Harlan's threats still echoing in his mind. Safe? Not yet. Not even close. Harlan was a coward, but a coward with power. And men like that never let go. What if he came back with his gang, maybe even with the law on his side? Outside the saloon, the night pressed heavy, silent, almost suffocating. The sisters clung to each other, as if letting go would drag them straight into hell. Ethan walked beside them, his boots crunching over the dry ground, eyes sweeping the darkness. At the edge of town, his old horse waited tethered to a post. He lifted Clara first, her small frame shivering in the cold night air. Anna followed her voice, still trembling. "You didn't have to save us. Now Harlan will come after you too." Ethan shook his head. "I've faced worse men than Harlan, and I'm still standing." His words carried the weight of years, the scars of a man who had weathered too many storms. Yet deep inside, he knew this storm was far from over. When they reached his ranch, the place looked worn and tired, but it was shelter nonetheless. A single lantern cast long shadows across the barren yard. Ethan led the sisters inside, poured water into tin cups, and pulled bread from a wooden cupboard. They ate in silence, too hungry for words. Ethan sat across from them, watching, remembering the nights his own daughter once sat in that very chair. The memory cut deep, like a blade twisting, but he hid it behind a face of stone. Finally, Anna's voice broke the silence. "What will happen when Harlan comes back?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "He will come back. He's too proud to let it go." Then he fixed his gaze on Anna. "But when he does, he won't find me unprepared." Clara shifted nervously, clutching the tin cup in both hands. "You mean to fight them? But you're just one man." Ethan gave a dry, gravelly laugh. "One man with a steady hand and a clean conscience is enough." For the first time since that terrible night began, the sisters looked at each other. In their eyes flickered the faintest spark of trust. The wind howled against the window. In the distance, a wolf cried. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Anna lowered her voice. "Why us, Ethan? You don't even know us. Why risk your life for us?" Ethan stared into the lantern flame, the answer heavy on his tongue. "Because, too many times, I stayed silent, and the people I loved paid the price. I won't let that happen again." The room fell into a weighted silence, the kind that lingers in the chest long after words have faded. If you wish to hear what happens next, to know what awaits when Harlan returns for revenge, then stay, because Ethan Cole's war has only just begun. Dawn broke over the ranch, the chill still sharp in the air. The sisters had barely slept, their eyes heavy with fear and doubt. Ethan was already outside, feeding the horse, his movements slow and steady, as if the night before had never happened. Anna stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Do you really think Harlan will come back today?" Ethan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Harlan's the kind of man who can't stand humiliation. Men like that always come back. Clara appeared behind her sister, clutching a coffee cup, far too big for her small hands. Her voice trembled. "What if he brings more men? What if he brings the sheriff?" Ethan paused, staring out at the barren fields. "The law can be bent. Men like Deputy Crow have been in Harlan's pocket for years. That kind are worse than outlaws." The sisters exchanged anxious looks. For now they were safe, but that safety was as thin and fragile as a blanket against the cold wind. That morning, Ethan Cole saddled his horse and rode straight into town. He left Anna and Clara behind at the ranch with strict instructions: stay inside. don't open the door for anyone. If trouble comes, get down into the root cellar and stay there until it's safe. The saloon was buzzing when Ethan stepped through the doors. Harlan sat at a table with Doyle, and of course, Deputy Crow was there too. The badge on his chest gleamed under the lamplight, his crooked smile as rotten as the soul behind it. "Well, well," Harlan drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The old rancher thinks he can play hero, does he? You paid my debt for them. But you think that means those two girls are free." The room went quiet. Ethan's voice stayed calm, steady, but each word cut the air like a blade. "They are free, and if you lay a hand on them again, you'll answer to me." Crow leaned back in his chair, tipping his hat with a smirk. "Big talk, Cole, but you forget something. The law in this town is mine to carry. If Harlan says they owe him, then they owe him. That's the law." Ethan's eyes locked on Crow's. The silence in the room stretched tight, heavy with dread. Finally, Ethan spoke slow and deliberate. "Not this time. Not while I'm still alive." The saloon erupted in murmurs. Some nodded, others looked away. But all of them felt it. A storm was coming. Harlan's grin returned sharper than ever. "Then we'll see who this town belongs to." And with that, the line was drawn, clear as day. Ethan knew the fight had only just begun. By noon, dust rose on the horizon, riders thundering closer. Harlan Doyle and Deputy Crow led the way, faces full of swagger, hands twitching near their weapons. Ethan stood firm on the ranch porch, rifle in hand, his shoulders heavy with age, but solid as stone. Behind him, Anna and Clara clung together, fear in their eyes, but also a flicker of resolve. They were tired of running. They were ready to stand. Villagers gathered, drawn by the noise, drawn by the tension in the air. Men and women who had suffered in silence for too long now stood watching. Harlan shouted, pointing at Ethan, calling him a thief, a liar, a man harboring debtors. Crow raised his badge high, declaring the law was on their side. But Ethan's voice rang out clear and sharp, cutting through the din. "You all know the truth. You've seen the bruises. You know what kind of men they are. The law isn't in a badge. The law is justice. And justice has been absent from this town for far too long." The crowd stirred. Whispers spread. Hearts began to shift. Anna stepped forward, pulling Clara with her. Her voice trembled, but did not break. "We're not the only ones they've hurt. We're just the ones still alive to tell it." That was enough. The villagers found their courage. Voices rose, demanding real justice. The power Harlan once held crumbled under the weight of truth. Crow's smirk vanished as the people he'd oppressed stepped forward at last. By the day's end, Harlan and Doyle were bound in ropes, led away to face judgment outside the town they once ruled. Crow was stripped of his badge, left behind, to answer for his corruption. When the dust settled, Ethan lowered his rifle. His chest felt heavy, but his eyes lighter than they had been in years. Anna stood beside him, her hand brushing his. A silent promise of something new. Not just survival, but a future. And here lies the lesson, my friend. A man may be old-scarred, convinced his best days are behind him. But when he chooses to stand, when he chooses to do what's right, he can still change everything. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting even when fear consumes you. So I ask you, if you were Ethan, would you walk away, or would you stand and fight? And if you were Anna, would you have the strength to speak when silence feels safer? These are the questions worth carrying, even after the story ends. If this story moved you, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, then hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter.